I would like to say thank you for granting me the week off. But after the cruise, the thank you is a little hard. In addition to some of the other incidents that happened, I became sick on the boat, and I had trouble breathing. Went to the medical unit, and it was $24.38, the bill. And you pay, or you don't get off the ship. Yeah? Oh, yeah. That was number one. Number two, they lost 2 pieces of my luggage, and a lot of other people's luggage. And I said, what am I going to do? Tomorrow, I'm talking to them, Tomorrow, I have to be in Tampa for church, and the things I would wear is in that luggage. My phone is in that luggage. My wallet's in that luggage. How did you lose luggage when it's on the ship? And it just doesn't make sense to me. Well, anyway, so you got something. I figured might as well show you what I wore, just for the hay. They had formal night. Now, don't call me Colonel Sanders. Yeah, right. And it was great. And they have that strobe thing and that. Yeah, you understand. Yeah. Some of you who have lived much more pronounced lives than I have. But there was a lot of positives. And one of the biggest positives for me was being with my family. And so that was sensational. And I hope that we'll have more occasions as that. Now, as religious people, we pine for justice, but we struggle over what our role should be in the tempestuous marketplace of ideas. So I figured rather than just add ideas that was already been our unique Unitarian Universalist voice might be an asset to the work of restorative justice. Let me take you back. September of 1975, Network was a movie. And it was all about Howard Beale, a fictitious anchor newscaster for the UBS Evening News. Howard learns that there are only going to be 2 more weeks on the air because of declining ratings. So he announces that night that he's going to commit suicide in the next Tuesday's broadcast. And they tried to shut him down, they tried to fire him, but some of the heads thought, well, let's see what happens. He promised to apologize for his outburst, but once he got on the air, he started going again. Everyone's life being blah, blah, blah. Well, his outburst caused ratings to spike. Now that they really did appreciate. And he got his own TV show, The Howard Beale Show. And he galvanizes the nation, persuading viewers to shout, "I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore." All over from their windows. Remember that movie? Well, he received top billing as the mad prophet of the airwaves. The show becomes the most highly rated program on TV. And Beale reinvents his image and finds new celebrity preaching his angry populist message in front of a live studio audience. On cue, he asks them to say the same thing. "We're as mad as hell and we're not going to take this anymore." It's his mantra. Well, to you, my family of community, have you ever been mad as hell that you resolved you were not going to take it anymore? And are you able to say what that was? With passion? No. But you've all been mad. Dr. Martin Luther King wrote a book titled The American Dream, and he makes a startling observation. There's a word today that's the ringing cry of modern psychology. It's maladjusted. All of us want to live well-adjusted lives in order to avoid being in a society of neurotic personalities. But I say to you, there are certain things without our social order which I'm proud to be maladjusted, and to which I call upon anyone of goodwill to be maladjusted also. I never did intend to adjust to the evils of segregation and discrimination. I never intended to adjust myself to religious bigotry. I never intended to adjust myself to economic conditions that'll take necessities from the many to give luxuries to the few. I never did intend to adjust myself to the madness of militarism and the self-defeating effects of physical violence. I call on every person of goodwill to be maladjusted, because it may well be that the salvation of our world lies in the hands of the maladjusted. Let me read you this poem. A 7-year-old girl, later in life, remembered this experience, and she wrote this. For the first time on the road north of Tampa, I felt the life sliding out of me. A drum in the desert, harder and harder to hear. I was 7. I lay in the car, watching palm trees swirl, a sickening pattern past the glass. My stomach was a melon split wide inside my skin. How do you know if you're going to die, Mama? I begged my mother for that answer. We'd been traveling for days. With strange confidence, she answered, when you can no longer make a fist. Years later, I smiled to think of that journey. The borders we must cross separately, stamped with our unanswerable woes. I who did not die, who am still living, still lying in the back seat, behind all of my questions, clenching and opening one small hand. Now, many of you know that I'm from a United Methodist tradition. And there was some moments of joy in that. As an ordained clergy, I've seen how worship became deeper and grew. And more so now in the Unitarian Universalist Church of Tampa. In the time that we've come to know each other, you and I, what happens here on Sundays emerges in many ways out of how we evolve as community. Most people who are here would say they're here because of community, whether they have a other sort of faith or not, but community is it. And the sermons I give are not so much meanderings that come out of my head as part of the ongoing conversation between us. I make it because this service today emerges directly out of that conversation. For a long time, I've observed that our national elections are becoming more distressing for everybody, in every kind of way. Bill Moyers was a Baptist minister, and I don't know how he did it. He came out of Texas. He became the press secretary for Lyndon Johnson in the Johnson administration. And he became an essayist. If you ever have anything that Bill Moyers wrote, read it. It's worth a lot. He said, Americans seem to be losing hope, and that without hope, we lose the talent and drive to cooperate in the shaping of our destiny. What we're seeing is an uncompromising righteous anger that's quick to judgment, when in fact the world is a lot more complicated than our righteous judgments allow for. And justice has other demands than to serve our petty needs. The Unitarian Universalist Church argues that as people committed to affirming the inherent worth and dignity of all, we need to be part of building a new way grounded in a commitment to make a common life together. And that common life has to be centered in compassion and with respect. as timely and relevant as that goal is, we're still left with the gnawing question at a time when so much we care about is under assault. What do we do about the anger that we feel? On both sides of the aisle, in every nook and cranny, in all of our nation, there's so much anger to go around that anybody could have ever imagined. Do you agree with that? Lots of anger. The truth is, though, that many of us are uncomfortable with anger, and for good reason. Our experience of others and even ourselves is that we're often at our worst when we're angry. Now, you all know me. I have never been angry, and I have never been difficult to deal with. Wow. Well, I take this moment of opportunity, a moment of privilege. I can't expect you to do something that I wouldn't do. So I must apologize, and they know who they are, to the people in this church that I may have offended, and that I will try to do better to earn your trust and to work with you to see your vision for ministry. Now, if I can't do that, how can I possibly ask you to do that to somebody you might be in conflict with? So I apologize to them. Anger can be a natural and even life-giving response to the circumstances of our lives. What do we do with the anger? That's the issue. Has anyone ever given you the advice? They give it to me all the time. Jack, before you send out that email, why don't you give it 24 hours and cool off a bit? And I've taken that advice too little. I should do it more. Anger is tricky because we often fail to distinguish the stimulus of the anger from the cause. For example, if I say, it made me mad that you came to the meeting late. The stimulus for the anger may have been the person arriving late, but it wasn't the cause. That's the fallacy that trips us up. And it's an easy mistake, living as we do in a culture that encourages us to use guilt to get our way. But the fact remains, what others do never is the root of what we feel. The image that I hold in my mind is like toddlers who fly off in a rage. I've seen them do it, my own kids, when they don't get their way. As a parent, I know I'm not the cause of their anger. The cause is their sadness over not getting what they want. My kids did that. My grandkids did that. Church people and clergy do that now. In the case and example I just mentioned, misinterpreting, not quite understanding. There used to be Gilda Radner was on Saturday Night Live, and she played Rosanna Dana. Something, right? And Jane Curtin would say, we have a real problem in the world because the world's resources won't be able to meet the needs of the people in years to come. And she goes off on a tirade, Rosanna Dana. Well, I think that's terrible. I just think that's horrible. Why can't our racehorses meet the needs of people who might want to ride them? And she went on and on and on at a tangent, and Jane Curtin had to say, no, not racehorses, resources. And then, she did the classic, never mind. Right? In the case that I just mentioned, in many ways I might have responded to the person being late. But the way I processed the experience in my mind caused me to get mad. Now here, though, I can see that my anger didn't really accomplish anything because it distanced me from what I really need in that instance, which was something like inspiration, fulfillment, and trust. So instead of expressing my anger, I could have taken a moment to reflect on why this person's lateness triggered me why I felt their promptness was important and shared that with them. And then we could have gotten on with the meeting and people could come together. And I saw her come in. Right, Doris? Wherever you are. Yeah. Oh, there you are. Oh, yes. Always teaching me. Now, what's important to remember is that anger in and of itself is not a bad thing. I like the metaphor that says anger can be valuable. We use it as an alarm clock to wake us up. But to realize that we have a need that isn't being met, and that we are thinking in a way that makes it unlikely to be met. That's the kind of anger that stirs us to action. It reminds me of what Dr. King said, speaking of the reference that I just did. There are certain practices or conditions, he said, to which we ought to be maladjusted, that rightly stir us to anger. I lost a dear friend this week, and I could not communicate with his family being on the boat. Rabbi Barry Silver has passed away. You probably didn't know him, but he was truly a maladjusted person for the right reasons. And he had very definite causes that would lead him to march and get people from all traditions. Big loss. And will be remembered for many years to come. Dr. King names racial segregation, religious bigotry, economic conditions that take necessities from the many and give luxuries to the few. The madness of militarism, the self-defeating effects of violence. I remember a very distinguished Coretta Scott King teaching that lesson. Yes, you see violence all around you. And if we are nonviolent, when you see a child that's in poverty and hungry, needing food, that's violence. And when political policies cause people to suffer, that's violence. Now, how should we frame that anger in a way that doesn't do damage or distract us from larger goals or deeper needs? How might anger be positive as an influence in a world of chaos and rage? One source where it's interesting to explore is the testimony of those prophets. Remember I read that to you? Full of wrath, all the way, especially in Amos. They were saying the people of Israel are not living up to what their faith is calling them to do, or even to be. Well, it wasn't punitive, but it was a hope, if not a dream, for them to live up to their calling. You remember the quote? I despise your festivals, and I take no delight in your solemn assemblies. Even though you offer my burnt offerings, I will not accept them. Take away from me the noise of your songs. I won't listen to the melody of your harps. But let justice roll down like waters, and righteousness like a mighty stream. Many readers, when they see that, they wonder why there's such harsh words and condemnation for the Jewish people that are preserved in Scripture. But as the great Jewish scholar Abraham Heschel remarked, the point of such angry testimony was not, in his words, petulant vindictiveness. No, it's a call to return and be who they know they can be. Somebody told me something, great advice, when I was at my lowest point. So low I had to reach up to touch bottom, right? Never doubt yourself. Never doubt yourself. And I just, fluffed that off until I began to think about it. Never doubt yourself. I'm gonna do better at that. In this case, Amos's rant is not disgust or disappointment, but reminding the people of their duty to one another, of how attention to songs and ceremonies distract them from the larger need for justice. As has been said, the call of anger is the call to cancel anger. It's not an expression of irrational, sudden, and instinctive excitement, impulsive, if you will, but a free and deliberate reaction to what is wrong and evil. This style of prophetic witness has a powerful history in our country. It dates back to those Puritans who envisioned themselves as a new Israel, building the promised land in the new world. I met somebody on the boat who said, "Oh, my mother used to work at Baylor." Where is Baylor? Wow, whatever. I thought, okay, they're from Washington. Anyway, he said, yeah, my mother used to work at Baylor, and we had a lot of Universalists, and the people couldn't, at Baylor, the administration, couldn't stand those Universalists. To which I said, really? Well, then I look at that as a statement of honor and a badge of courage. Because if you couldn't understand it, and you didn't get it, and they don't like it, there's something right about that. And their homiletics years ago often took on what they took to be prophetic spirit, admonishing followers for their failure to live in the spirit of that vision. What's yours? What is your vision? I have a bunch of mine. But we hardly ever do that. We hardly ever look at our vision. Now, for some reason, I looked at the back of the bulletin. And if you do that, too, in the back of your bulletin, you will see the word community in almost every other sentence. It's right there. And now we need to fulfill it. In time, as the community grew to include people outside the nucleus of settlers, that style came to seem narrow and shrill. Provincial, prudent, I don't know. A split developed in the church, and the Unitarian Universalists back in the day were among those who led that split. People who believed that faith arose not from the admonishing of clergy, but from how individual believers sought out their own beliefs. It was an empowering kind of religious awakening. Now that was different from me, coming from a mainline Protestant experience. But it also seemed to have meant that from early in our evolution as a religious movement, there was a deep suspicion of the role of emotion in the development of faith. We were a reasonable religion, and emotional exuberance was seen as merely manipulation. Well, I remember a man named Harry Emerson Fosdick. He was a Presbyterian. They fired him because he, got them angry. Said something he shouldn't have. But he captured the liking of a man who we should all hope that we capture that too. John D. Rockefeller Jr. And he came to Harry and said, I want to build a church on Riverside Drive. And I want you to be in the pulpit. Now, Harry didn't quite understand it because Harry's skills as an orator were not the best. But his written word was astounding. And on May 22nd, 1922, Harry Emerson Fosdick preached a sermon called, Shall the Fundamentalists Win? Well, the people in that Riverside church were lined up for blocks to get in to a man that didn't have much strength speaking, but had a lot of strength writing. For all the ways that it may be true, the problem is that if we choose not to address how emotion influences our faith. We are left tongue-tied with how to respond when it does. And of course, it does all the time. For our faith, the fundamental center of trust in our lives, connects deeply to that which we care about most deeply. And it can't help but make us feel sad and glad, and yes, mad as hell sometimes, which doesn't exist. The UUA, you want us to tell you how many gays transcended youth? You want us to tell you how many atheists? You want us to tell you how many Jews and African Americans we have in our church? No. I'm wondering, how best might I answer that? And I wrote that. Well, if we're to live satisfying lives and connect compassionately with others, we must learn to tune into that which is the core to us, how we truly feel. We're not in touch with our feelings, and many people are afraid of their feelings. Anger, as we saw, poses probably the greatest challenge of all because it's hard to wrestle with. It's potentially deadly and damaging. And yet, like a refining fire, it can bring crystal clarity to a situation, like an alarm clock, waking us up to our duty. I guess I expressed some of that when they told me they lost their luggage. I guess maybe I was a little bit short. I certainly was short of luggage. Well, how do we welcome anger into our religious lives? I wonder if an understanding of prophecy might offer us a way through. I'm not talking about those television ministers, but a call to return to the premise that salvation lies within. Without contempt of prophetic language, we can use that as a tool to combat entrenched social evil, to shake people out of their indifference. There was a great document that most people haven't read. Maybe it's good to find out. Has anybody here, raise your hand, read Letter from a Birmingham Jail? 1. Oh, 2, 3. Great. Well, in that letter, the most profound document, others have said, not me, of civil rights that's ever been written, he says the greatest threat to society is not the KKK or the Black Panther movement or the fringe groups. It's that group in the middle that will take no position, yay or nay. And he said the greatest time of segregation is Sunday morning during worship hour. Well, I think there's some value in that. We need to be clear about what we believe and how we are going to effectively share that. The civil rights movement insisted, those young people that were idealistic and they were at the counter and then some people poured milkshakes on their head and worse. They insisted they prepare themselves, purify their motives before engaging in civil rights. You might say they wanted to make sure that their needs weren't being served, as were the needs of justice, not just their ego. Effective prophecy must arise from the context in which underlying values are shared. Now, part of the power of civil rights is that it appealed to an ethic of equality. Now, most people, even their opponents, could agree. Gay rights and civil rights share together the struggle for human rights. And I had that experience. We were charging up the hill for civil rights. A lot of my colleagues, black pastors, were so thrilled that we were on the line with them, so thrilled that we were there to help. And then when we turn to them, now mind you, gay man here, right? We need your help for marriage equality and gay rights and things like that. And their answer to me was, oh, no, definitely not. That's against the Bible. That's what they said. Pick and choose. Well, prophecy need not be the work of only one individual. Indeed, it can never be the work of only one individual at all. Maybe we should explore the notion of what it might mean to create a prophetic community right here in Tampa. A community that sees our work as making history rather than being pushed around by it. I'm really glad when I talk to people now. Do you know the Unitarian Universalist Church? Not directly, but I know of it. And, like my mother worked at Baylor, and they couldn't stand the universe. Well, at least it's something. See, what emerges from such intentionality are three main qualities defining congregations. Let's take ours. Do we have the values that we stand for? Do we embrace an ethic of radical caring? And is our focus on hope? If our call is to return, we must be clear on what we seek to return to the principles of moral integrity, openness, and compassion that guides us. We also need to increase the inclusive aspect, that our congregation becomes a place where you can relax, enter the door, and know that all our edges are accepted. We don't have to choose which of our identities we can safely allow into the room. All means all. And we need to orient our work toward a concrete and visionary sense of the future, that we understand our hope, not as a wishful thought, but as a disciplined, existential choice that helps us to bear together what we cannot bear alone. That's what I get from you. In such a community, we might learn how to turn our anger into action rather than recrimination or blame, and to dispatch with facile righteous judgment that only puffs up our sense of self-importance. I can't imagine I got this far and had done some stupid things when I was angry. Really. I was so mad one time that I kicked my car door and it bent in. I hurt me. Well, in a community where we learn to attend to each other so well that we listen to each other with speech that awakens our hearts, that touches our deepest longing and our deepest joy. Then we arrive back at the beginning. What do we do with anger? Well, I think we can make it a tool for our own and our community's awakening. That fist that that little girl held up tightly as she was going through that terrible time, opening and closing her hands in the back seat of that car ride, is a gesture not of aggression, but of self-determination, of her desire to live. It embraces the impulse with us to endure, to stand up for what matters, and not just by ourselves alone. It also calls us to ally ourselves with others who will stand with us, who will join us as angry but gentle people, giving clear testimony that every life matters.